Is there a particular work process that you've developed because you work as a pair as opposed to individually?
We're not conscious of that. We always say that maybe it's interesting what Gilbert thinks about X, and maybe it's interesting what I think about X, but what we are interested in is what we think and feel about that.
You're suggesting there's almost a sort of telepathic communication there then?
Yes, we never discuss anything. We just, I mean, it's very good being two because you eliminate a lot of fear that every artist has.
What, the insecurity,
yes,
you mean?
You eliminate that totally. You just create.
Okay, well I'll be on that. I'll be on that level because I'll be speaking, facing in that direction.
Gentlemen, can I just have
if you could just tell me what you had for breakfast.
How do we sound? 1, 2, 3.
Fine.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Excellent, thank you.
Right. So as we start,
yes,
both looking at
just
me,
sit there looking at Stephen for a moment.
and we'll run 10 seconds on that as the wide shot, and then we'll start. Is my hand in shot? Shall I get it out?
Yeah, it's not. Okay.
Okay. Is there a great sense of pride, do you think, that now you're being given this huge retrospective show at the Hayward, I suppose Britain's leading gallery?
We don't believe that we've been given the show. We believe that the public are being given an exhibition of our work. It is not for us. We make the pictures for people.
In fact, we like to serve the people, to bring art to the public, not for ourselves.
In general, I think you feel that a lot of modern art is not doing that, don't you? That it's obscure and that your work is actually for the public, whereas most modern artists are not.
When we make our pictures, we make them with the viewer in mind, so that we say that the art, our art, is the friendship formed between the viewer's life and the subject in the picture.
Is there any particular sense in which you feel that other artists don't achieve that? Or is it a general atmosphere about modern art that makes it difficult?
Well, this century has seen a lot of art which is based on, I don't know why I do it, I just do it and I don't care what you think. That's been a fashionable attitude, and that's one which we think is very decadent and very cruel to human progress.
And we like to deal, our art is based on dealing with all the feelings that are inside every single person, not only artistic people. Like Shakespeare did. He can speak to every single person, and that's what we like to do. All our feelings inside should be used for everybody.
Was this a philosophy that you'd formed when you left art school and did the first living sculptures, or is it something you think that has strengthened and developed particularly as you've carried on?
We would say that we've always had a very, very highly developed sense of purpose, probably more than any other artist that we know. One of our earliest slogans was art for all, and certainly the living sculptures had that quality of cutting across class, race and age. It was a generally available language.
Why the development from the living sculpture into art based on photographs, the photographic image?
We don't believe it is, we believe it is the same idea, because the artist as a speaking person through different forms. And this form to create very big pictures is very good for us, because you don't have to be there day and night.
You used to stand for hours on end, didn't you? Bronzed up or whatever for the performances.
We never called them performances.
No, you didn't, did you?
Sculptures. It's a very important distinction. Performances, we say, are a form that angers uneducated people. And our living sculpture never did that. It appealed and was able to speak to people of all walks of life.
Yes, we believe very much as the artist, as a speaker.
Your present art, which is now adopting these enormous proportions. You've got these huge images based on photographs. Appears, I think, deceptively simple in that it clearly does communicate to people who don't have any artistic background or interest, but I think people may not realise just how much work goes into it. It's very labour intensive, isn't it?
Yes, but it's not important for us that people understand that. Although the works are very, very, very handmade, we like that they have a very polished, magical look to them. We don't want people to be conscious of us as working artists. We like them to think of us more as thinking, feeling, hoping, dreading artists rather than working artists. That's why we never allow photographs or films in the studio. We don't believe that's an important aspect of our work.
Just the message that we are producing should be visible.
What would you say really characterises the message? I know a lot of people think there's a strong religious and moral feeling in your work.
Of course, the world is very religious. Western civilization is based on Christ's example. We acknowledge that and we honour that in part. We have other works which deal with other aspects of Christianity, but basically we start with the idea that we want to destroy the stupidity that educated people are atheists and people of another class go to church. We think that's an oversimplification and a cruel way of looking at it.
Well, I'll repeat that question after that.
There's a lot of noises.
Somebody breaking into a car or something?
Yes, I think there is. And there's money there. Okay.
I think, actually, just from looking at the pieces, there are religious images, and a lot of people have found a moral tone, even described as Victorian, in your work. Is it fair to say that you feel there's a strong moral and religious content?
No more than Western civilization itself is. We are working within the framework of Western Christian culture. All of Western civilization is based on the example of Christ on the cross. Every policeman, every church, every hospital, everything, schools, universities, come from that inspiration. And we as artists want to say that we acknowledge and honour that heritage. We don't want to say that we're posh, superior, educated people who don't believe in God and uneducated people go to church. We think that's a cruel oversimplification of the very rich reality that exists.
Is personal belief on your own part important to your work?
It certainly is part of our forming.
Yes, without belief one wouldn't be able to change the world.
We are more involved perhaps in Christian power than in Christian faith, we would say.
It's always considered, and partly because you appear in your work, that your life is your work. Is there a division between the two, life and work?
No, there is not a division. But we believe there had never been a division between an artist and the work.
What I suppose then is new is the fact that there are two of you and only one art. Are you yourselves as artists divisible?
Well, that's unusual in fine art, but in all other walks of life, it's the most normal unit to have two people. It's the most standard arrangement.
Is there a particular work process that you've developed because you work as a pair as opposed to individually?
We're not conscious of that. We always say that maybe it's interesting what Gilbert thinks about X, and maybe it's interesting what I think about X. But what we are interested in is what we think and feel about that, the area of common ground and agreement.
Is that something that you discover in a work of art? Because I understand that you, for instance, in creating the last series of pieces that are about to be exhibited, you created a huge bank of photographic images. At what point do you discover the common ground in selecting the final images?
Well,
for exhibition?
already the images are images that are agreeable to us, or dreadful to us, or lovely to us. They're already set within the framework of our feelings.
You're suggesting there's almost a sort of telepathic communication there, then?
Yes, we never discuss anything. We just. I mean, it's very good being two because you eliminate a lot of fear that every artist has.
What, the insecurity?
Yes, you eliminate that totally. You just create.
You've created here in this house an extraordinary environment. It was compared by our interviewee with the Sir John Soane Museum because it's a unit that you've obviously lavished enormous attention and care on. How important is the control that you have of your lifestyle to being able to work?
We like very much to reduce life, that it is becoming very simple, that we have time to think.
Is this part of London, where you've lived now for a number of years, important to you as a source of work and inspiration?
We are not inspired by the locality, we're inspired by Western civilization and by the need for change.
And we believe very much that London is freer than any other cities in the world.
And yet I think it's probably fair to say that you're, while very successful here, more successful in America and in other parts of Europe, aren't you, where you have an enormously high profile.
We have an enormous public following in Britain, as we have in America and even in Europe, yes.
But a public following more than a critical following
Yes,
here.
oh yes.
That is for certain.
And what is the problem, do you think, that the critics have with your work?
We don't need them. That's the big problem. We are speaking direct to the public without them in the middle.
The profession has become used to the idea that the public approaches the art, finds it very ugly or uninteresting, and then the professional says, oh, well, if you come back on Thursday, there'll be a very nice posh lady who will explain why in fact it is beautiful and why in fact it is interesting. In our case, we didn't require that. We speak with a language invented by ourselves. We didn't borrow from antiquity when we make our pictures. It's our own personal invention. And it's a language that speaks across class, across age, and across race, directly to people.
And yet it seems that your credo is much more related to pre-photographic artists, to the artists of previous centuries, than to the other practicing artists of today.
Yes, we say we are post-obscurist artists. We come after the craze for obscurity and weirdness in art.
Yeah, I mean, artists used to be there to publicize religion, no? To make Jesus Christ more important. No? And I think, now we can publicize our thoughts completely.
Are there nonetheless artists who have gone to some extent down those abstract paths of which you don't approve and which you don't follow, whose work you admire? Do you find yourselves at odds with most other practicing artists, or are there people whose work you admire and enjoy?
We don't look towards art. We never look at other art. We only look at the world.
You make life very difficult for your critics then, don't you? Because they can't put an ism behind you.
We have, on the other hand, we have an enormous support from very interesting, very clever writers. It's not entirely true that critics have a problem with their work.
No, and indeed you have, because we've interviewed one, considerable academic support from people who see you in a historical context.
Yes, we have very, very important writers, even a German one who did a very big work on us for the last 5 years, 80,000 words. Very interesting.
I think we have growing support from cleverer writers and increasing hostility from a different kind of writer.
Is it important to you to see your work in a historical context?
Within the profession in which we have to exist, yes. But in general, that's not necessary. It's perfectly all right if a child enters the Hayward and sees a large display and doesn't even realize that they are art objects. It's not necessary for him.
One thing that's become very much a part of your work is the grid system of putting the pieces together. You work from a template which is a grid, and most of your images fit behind a grid. Is that important in the finished product, that one can actually in a way see the joins?
We feel it is exactly like building a big house in bricks. You cannot build a skyscraper with one big brick. And that's why we are building up a big image.
Must also, though, make your work process infinitely more difficult because you're not creating a single image. Or does it, in fact,
No,
are the grids actually an assistance to you in building up the image?
We would say so. They're part of the language, just as one's life is divided into years and months and days, or a sentence is divided into words. So they're part of the structure. They make it easier to follow the message, we believe.
How significant to the two of you is it that you actually have done something extraordinary to the self-portrait? You do appear in so much of the work.
We wouldn't call it self-portrait, ever. Just a speaking artist.
We say that we are standing there just as the viewer is standing there. It is fair to the viewer. After all, if you look at an exhibition of Constable paintings, you know that every picture is by Constable. You don't say that you went to see a marvellous elm tree. You say you went to see a wonderful Constable. Constable never did pictures by anybody else. They were always by him. And we have taken that perhaps one stage further. Yes, we extended that idea.
So you're really putting yourself in as the viewer rather than as the subject. You are looking in a way at your own art rather than being the focus of it.
As well, just as a scientist will write a book saying, I have studied isotopes for 13 years, I have come to the conclusion, ours is an I like that in a way, yes? Like a letter writer's self.
Get that?
I picked up the bell, yeah.
We've got a few
Doesn't
of those.
matter.
No, it's life, isn't it? Right, pause.
Excellent.